Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast, and welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
The Great Silence, the absence of SETI signals from alien civilizations, is perhaps the strongest indicator of all that high relativistic velocities are attainable and that everybody out there knows it. The sobering truth is that relativistic civilizations are a potential nightmare to anyone living within range of them. The problem is that objects traveling at an appreciable fraction of light speed are never where you see them when you see them. Light speed lag. Relativistic rockets, if their owners turn out to be less than benevolent, are both totally unstoppable and totally destructive. A starship weighing in at 1,500 tons, approximately the weight of a fully fueled space shuttle sitting on the launch pad, impacting an Earth-like planet at only 30% of light speed, will release 1.5 million megatons of energy, an explosive force equivalent to 150 times today's global nuclear arsenal. I'm not going to talk about ideas. I'm going to talk about reality. It will probably not be good for us ever to build and fire up an antimatter engine. According to Powell, given the proper detecting devices, a Valkyrie engine burn could be seen out to a radius of several light years and may draw us into a game we'd rather not play. A game in which, if we appear to be even the vaguest threat to another civilization, and if the resources are available to eliminate us, then it is logical to do so. The game plan is, in its simplest terms, the relativistic inverse to the golden rule. Do unto the other fellow as he would do unto you, and do it first. When we put our heads together and tried to list everything we could say with certainty about other civilizations, without having actually met them, all that we knew boiled down to three simple laws of alien behavior. 1. Their survival will be more important than our survival. If an alien species has to choose between them and us, they won't choose us. It is difficult to imagine a contrary case. Species don't survive by being self-sacrificing. 2. Wimps don't become top dogs. No species makes it to the top by being passive. The species in charge of any given planet will be highly intelligent, alert, aggressive, and ruthless when necessary. 3. They will assume that the first two laws apply to us. They won't come to get our resources or our knowledge or our women, or even because they're just mean and want power over us. They'll come to destroy us to ensure their survival, even if we're no apparent threat, because species death is just too much to risk, however remote the risk. The most humbling feature of the relativistic bomb is that even if you happen to see it coming, its exact motion and position can never be determined. And given a technology even 100 orders of magnitude above our own, you cannot hope to intercept one of these weapons. It often happens in these discussions that an expression from the Old West arises. God made some men bigger and stronger than others, but Mr. Colt made all men equal. Variations on Mr. Colt's weapon are still popular today, even in a society that possesses hydrogen bombs. Similarly, no matter how advanced civilizations grow, the relativistic bomb is not likely to go away. We ask that you try just one more thought experiment. Imagine yourself taking a stroll through Manhattan, somewhere north of 68th Street, deep inside Central Park, late at night. It would be nice to meet someone friendly, but you know that the park is dangerous at night. That's when the monsters come out. There's always a strong undercurrent of drug dealings, muggings, and occasional homicides. It is not easy to distinguish the good guys from the bad guys. They dress alike and the weapons are concealed. The only difference is intent, and you can't read minds. Stay in the dark long enough and you may hear an occasional distant shriek or blunder across a body. How do you survive the night? The last thing you want to do is shout, "I'm here." The next to last thing you want to do is reply to someone who shouts, "I'm a friend." What you would like to do is find a policeman or get out of the park. But you don't want to make noise or move towards a light where you might be spotted. And it is difficult to find either a policeman or your way out without making yourself known. Your safest option is to hunker down and wait for daylight, then safely walk out. There are, of course, a few obvious differences between Central Park and the universe. There is no policeman, there is no way out, and the night never ends.
My grandpa was recruited right out of high school and worked at an Air Force base his whole life. He eventually ran the logistical team for the logistical hub of the Air Force. He has told me some pretty interesting projects he has worked on. From Blue Book, he said he thought a hidden hand was involved due to conflicting information, but he saw corporate logos on pics supposedly on the Roswell craft, to programming for Aurora, to managing a team of around 30 scouting in Afghanistan almost 40 years ago, have been interested in their resources, like lithium, for a long time. Anyway, by far the most interesting thing he worked on was he led a team which was responsible for deconstructing and quantifying the properties of a ring-like object that was part of a handgun-like device not made by human hands. It wasn't from Earth and had nanotech properties extremely surpassing what we understood. At that time the project ended in a virtual failure because of the sophistication of this object. Interestingly, he used to fly out to the Pentagon every week, and once or twice a month he would ask to divert and take his meeting at his house via a conference call, so he could go animal tracking, his hobby. He was denied for years. Except on 9/11, where suddenly it was approved and he literally was on the phone, in meeting, with people on the side of the Pentagon that got hit. He heard the phone go dead and all of that. Pretty weird.
Alien abduction trauma usually surfaces as dreams and odd happenings in childhood. I myself am an abductee, and it came about when I remembered waking up outside my house frequently as a kid. Even though we had an alarm and I lived on the second floor, though one time the alarm was going off and I had a recurring dream of falling, and an angel catching me and slowly dropping me into my bed. I always thought they were dreams. I was a religious kid, but one time I woke up a good 2 feet above my loft bed and fell into it. Needless to say, it's one of the only memories of my childhood. That, and I have a fear of hospitals, needles, invasive surgery, waking up to someone by my bed. To the point where I sleep with a light on, always have, and a knife or sharp object by my bed. Oh, and I always had an irrational fear of pictures of gray aliens. I couldn't look at them without having a panic attack. Well, turns out those dreams weren't dreams. I don't want to sound completely loon though, so I won't go into details about what I found. When I was very little, I saw a dark craft floating above a lake in California. We had a house there, and I went there often. I could clearly see it against the dark blue of the sky, because it blocked out stars. My father was with me and he said he couldn't see anything. That's when the dream started. For reference, I live in a suburb called Monte Sereno in Northern California. I essentially live on a mountain next to a ravine, so there's tons of room between my neighbors and I in the town. Through regression hypnosis, I learned that at least 6 different times, I was taken from my bed. Or in 2 instances, I walked outside to a small, torus-shaped craft with red strobing lights. I was incredibly scared, but they didn't look like aliens to me because until a couple years later, I'd never seen the image of the gray. I was religious enough to think I was going to see God like a dead person does, or like the prophets did. Because of this, I was more nervous than scared. They didn't speak, it didn't look like they had mouths. In fact, I've found I look people directly in the eyes whenever I talk to them because I remember having to look into their eyes a lot. The way he spoke, it felt like the voice I hear when I think of words in my head. They walked me to a circular room, a white room with an oval table in the middle, and I was laid down on it, and instantly couldn't move. They stared into my eyes for a long while, and I felt my head buzzing like I had a headache. At one point I had tubes inserted into my nose and mouth. I was never told why anything was taking place. The last time I saw them, they told me I had been very patient with them, and thanked me for playing with them. I remember one time my alarm clock went off in the middle of the night, and it had no batteries in it. I was so afraid that I woke up immediately, and then the next thing I knew, it was still going off and I was in bed. My parents rushed in, and when they picked it up, it kept making noise for maybe 5 seconds before going silent. I threw it away immediately. I later found that I had heard the alarm, and after waking up in the middle of my sleep that night, and levitated out of my window. Without opening it, I felt like my whole body squeezed through it and I felt buzzing everywhere. Only coming back right before the alarm went off. This was the last time I could recall them seeing me. I had a long discussion with their leader, who was really just a tall one in a bright smock with a blue stripe, and he informed me that I wasn't alone, but that I was special, and that I'd understand someday. He told me they'd come back, and not to be afraid. He mentioned that I was very lucky, and he told me I wasn't old enough to understand what they wanted from me. There's more, of course, but this has taken a long time to write, and it would take longer to write the rest. This is the most interesting bit though. I don't quite care if you believe it or not. It was nice to know the weird difference I felt growing up wasn't just me being weird. No one in my school believed me when I told them I would talk to God, and my teachers at the Catholic school told me I was lying to be funny.
Let me start off by saying I'm not really a believer in the supernatural. I'm a 24-year-old guy, and to the best of my knowledge I'm not crazy. However, I do believe in aliens. I'm going to tell you why. Whether this belief is a symptom of my delusions or not is up to you. I just feel like I have to share this. Months ago I shared my story in a thread on /x/. Since then, the story has gotten even a little weirder. When I was young, I was sent to a child psychiatrist for what most of my family and friends believed to be depression and hallucinations. This was a pretty big shock at the time, because before this I was a very outgoing and happy kid. The problems all started when we moved away from our small town to a very, and I mean very, rural area. Woods for miles. Eastern Canada. Initially, I remember loving it. I had a big yard, woods to play in, forts to build. It was great. It wasn't long after we moved there that I began having trouble sleeping. I would have what I thought to be nightmares. It wasn't odd for my mother to find me laying in the bathtub crying, or in other weird places, not knowing how I got there. The dream I would have consisted of almost the exact same thing every time. I would wake up and be drawn to the window. I would look through the blind and see an old shed behind our house. The lights would be on in it, and the doors would be opening and slamming shut again and again. I would watch this happen until suddenly everything changed. My head would ache so bad, my arms and legs become heavy as I am unable to stop looking out the window. I just stand there unable to move with my head splitting with pain. Then suddenly everything I can see changes. Flashes of bright lights in my eyes. I can see the blur of faces and stuff going on that I can't quite make out. The pain is gone, and all that's left is a deafening ringing in my ears as I see these images flash before me. I wake up, somewhere I don't remember being. As I said, I would wake up in the bathroom, basement, out on the deck. I remember being very, very scared. Shaking, and to the point where all I could muster was to lay where I was and cry. This continued on until I could no longer go to school because it was happening so much that I was getting too little sleep to function properly, plus it was severely affecting my head. My parents thought it was just sleepwalking at first until I became depressed. I don't remember this incident I'm about to tell you, but it was recently told to me by my stepfather and was most likely the reason I was sent to live with my grandparents and to see a child psych. He told me he awoke one morning to find me in my closet, twisting clothes hangers together to fashion a noose. He immediately took it away from me and asked me what I was doing. I told him something like, "I don't want to go again," or something like that. I have no recollection of that even whatsoever. But I do have the vivid memory of watching my stepdad hold my mother as she buried her face into his chest crying. She couldn't even look at me. I remember being puzzled as to why this was. I'm going to give you some background information now, as this next part is rather strange. I was born with a club foot. I had many surgeries as a baby to correct this. Recently, complications have arisen with my foot that required me to have a triple fusion to stop the pain. Before my surgery could be done, they needed to X-ray and MRI my foot before they could go in and do the fusion. From my records, I was still supposed to have a pin left in my foot from my previous surgeries. Something they had neglected to take out when I was younger. The MRI that came back showed no trace of the said pin. It was as if it had just up and disappeared from my body. I had to call my mother to come with me to my next appointment to confirm that I didn't have any other surgeries that somehow didn't make it on my record. The fucking thing was just gone. So I went ahead and had the triple fusion. This is right around when I started having these dreams again. The exact same dream of waking up and being drawn to the window to see a shed, light on, doors slamming, bright lights and blurs. I would wake up in the upstairs bathroom, wearing my cast. Something that I could not possibly do myself. My girlfriend did not notice me waking until I would call her from upstairs asking her to help me come down. It was around this time I thought there might be a connection between my missing pin and whatever the hell happened to me as a child. But I couldn't understand why it was happening again. I was less scared this time, but it still jarred me.
When mankind ventured out into space, We never suspected what was to come. Our first inhabited planet was less than 30 light-years away, far closer than we would have thought. The issue? Everyone was dead. The entire planet was like that, a perfectly stable world with no issues that we could determine. And yet it seems the self-termination rates were the greatest cause of death among the people. We don't know why, but they apparently had been doing this for some time. Years of study later showed that the reptile-like race had taken nearly 10 times as long as we did to reach the industrial age, and had not gotten very far beyond that. Time went on, and we soon discovered that this was not an isolated occurrence. Species after species had killed each other and themselves off for one reason or another. Some had died off so early only a few stone monuments marked that they had ever been there. Some had established empires spanning nearly a dozen systems. But always they were all dead, down to the last child. And so we traveled the stars, colonizing the lost home worlds we found, along with others. We studied the creatures on many worlds, although none bore intelligent life. In time, we studied the technology of the more advanced dead races, gleaming a scientific secret or two we had missed. It was rather amusing to see the scientific community collectively slap their heads when they saw the simple ideas and concepts they had missed. Once, and just once, we found a sentient race still alive. On a planet with 3/4 the gravity of Earth, a planet primarily dominated by jungles bore a race of insect-like scavengers. They were barely beyond the Stone Age, farming and agriculture still in its early days. We considered making contact, but in the end decided against it. They were a very violent race, and many would kill one another for the smallest detail. Self-termination also seemed to be something they would resort to with little or no good reason. In fact, the entire race seemed insane. Long-term observation showed that after hatching, the individual would slowly but surely go insane, to the point where none reached old age. In fact, the only reason this race has not yet gone extinct is a combination of high birth rates, short lifespans, and a child being able to defend itself hours after birth. In any other race, this bizarre affliction can and did drive them to extinction. For nearly 700 years, mankind grew and expanded. We did not find another living race during that time, or find out how we were immune. Many came up with theories, but none fit better than any others. Ethnic, religious, and cultural differences became less important when you were away from Earth, and in the end, those who could not agree simply lived on different worlds. The UTA, United Terran Alliance, controlled over 87% of mankind's colonies from its seat of power on Earth. A few rogue factions cropped up, piracy and smuggling saw a rebirth in this new space age, and mankind went on as it always had. Then, a moment that would change our history came. The UTA Dreadnought's supremacy was in essence a city in space, constructed with our most advanced technology, to the point where systems were updated during construction, and having a length of nearly 7 miles in length, it was the mightiest ship we had ever created. The Supremacy was sent to investigate a new world our long-range sensors showed had space-age technology upon it. It was farther out than we had ever traveled before, but not by much. It was assumed that this would be just another dead world. Then we might find some usable raw materials pre-harvested in the form of abandoned constructions in orbit. What we found was an outpost of a spacefaring race, its people still alive and well. Dozens of ships were in orbit around a rocky, empty world, along with a space dock to repair and refuel them. They were remarkably primitive compared to our own, and much smaller. The largest was perhaps the length of a football field, if that. From the scarring and damage, along with the derelict ship floating nearby of a different make, they had been fighting not too long ago. Our first contact did not go so well, however. We would later piece together what happened, and it went something like this. As soon as what might have at the time been the largest spaceship in the galaxy appeared on top of them, the race known as the Kandar were sent to the edge of panic. The commander tried to keep a disaster from occurring and ordered his ships not to open fire. Communications on both sides failed. We ourselves had long ago stopped carrying any equipment or training our crew for first encounters. and apparently the Kandar had not had any first contacts of their own in hundreds of years. It also didn't help that our subspace communications were just advanced enough that the garbled words the poor Kandar picked up on their outdated systems sounded horribly sinister and alien even by the wide standards of the galaxy as it now was. Then one of the Kandar gunmen on the closest ship had a panic attack after hearing our garbled transmission. He fired upon the Supremacy, which in a placating gesture had lowered its shields. The shot was able to breach the hull at a single point and cost the lives of 3 crewmen. The captain of Supremacy ordered shields raised and a warning shot fired. Unlucky for the Kandar, the concept of warning shots was alien to them, and they did not stop to ask why the single shot had missed. It was a short fight. The Supremacy blew away a single craft to secure its escape vector. A sad but necessary tactic. This only hurt our reputation further with what happened later. As we soon discovered, nearly 3% of the galaxy was filled with what was known as the Veil of Madness. Any race within this sector of space would slowly but surely go insane. Short jaunts were safe enough, but more than that, and permanent damage to the mind would result. We had apparently been sitting in the galactic equivalent of the Bermuda Triangle, and had finally breached its edge. When the Kandar realized that both our entrance and escape vectors lead directly into the Veil, a panic started. With surprising speed, news spread among their people, and among others, of what had happened. The story grew worse with each retelling, especially once it left official military reports. Tales of the titanic black ship that came from beyond the Veil sent out signals in a horrid dark language, obliterated dozens of the Kandar's finest warships in seconds for no reason, and then vanished like a ghost soon spread everywhere. Humanity has become the bogeyman of the universe. Apparently our government's size and our tech level was a fair bit higher than most races due to all the breathing room we had. The galaxy is a very crowded place, the larger empires usually spanning no more than 20 or 30 systems. Raids from pirate groups further cemented our dark reputation, and in time we came to work with the role. Every attempt to convince people that we wanted fair negotiations was seen as a deception. Rather than fight a losing battle, we played the role given to us. Soon we were seen as wicked but not unreasonable, and gained both fear and respect throughout the galaxy. Few humans appeared in view of aliens outside of deliberately frightening power armor, and human ambassadors used voice synthesizers to sound like that first garbled communication had. Looking back, it's actually worked in our favor. After years of contact, most alien races know almost nothing about humans other than exaggerated horror stories. The only bit of info we were more than happy to share with them was the reason we can live in the Veil. Turns out we were all a little crazy to start with. I think the fact we're pulling the largest practical joke in the galaxy was already proof enough of that.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.